Hi, this is Deena Thomson, author of Fallen Poppies, and this is Chapter 30. And this is Chapter 31.
Chapter 30. There was a small farewell a few days later for the little babe that never was. It wasn't truly a funeral since there was no baby to bury, but a small ceremony to say goodbye to what might have been. Mara Joy wore a black dress with a matching black veil fashionably covering her face so no one could see the expression that blanketed it. JoBeth had insisted that Alan get a wheelchair for Mara Joy to sit in. She didn't want her child to strain herself. They had nearly lost her through the whole ordeal as it was. She wasn't having Mara Joy overdoing it. Chad stood beside the tiny headstone and wept real tears for the child he had never really wanted. He had tried to fantasize about playing ball with a son or showing his friends how beautiful his daughter was. He believed that when the child was born, he would begin to feel good about the marriage he was forced into. The child was supposed to do that. It was supposed to take away that feeling of being an animal trapped in a snare. Or at least the baby was supposed to make his bondage bearable. But then again, it was the baby that had put him in this prison in the first place. And now the baby was dead, and he was in a pit he didn't know how to get out of. He looked over at Mara Joy, who sat stiffly in her wheelchair. Her mother was next to her, holding tightly to her hand, hovering like a bobcat, ready to pounce. Mara Joy had not exaggerated when she said her parents would hunt him down and make him pay for getting her pregnant. The way her mother hovered over her sent chills down Chad's spine. What was it that made him shudder when he thought about how possessive his mother-in-law was over his wife? He couldn't help but think it was destructive in some way. He shook himself briefly and looked again at her somber form. She wouldn't talk to him. He had received the message about the miscarriage shortly after it had happened. JoBeth sent Alan to the grocery store from work to deliver what Chad considered his life sentence. He looked up into the gray sky as clouds began to form quickly. Soon, they would drop their tears on all of them. In his mind, Chad repeatedly screamed, "Why me? Why has this happened to me?" Then it dawned on him. Nothing was holding him to Mara Joy anymore. There was no baby. She couldn't threaten him anymore. It was obvious she had wanted to marry him. No one would believe he raped her now. He could do it. He would have to wait a while, get his plans together. His heart began to beat. Could it be over? Could the hell that he had brought into his life finally come to an end? He would have to leave town, of course. He would never be accepted after abandoning Mara Joy. Chad shook his head. It didn't matter. He'd be glad to see the last of this hellhole town. Good riddance to bad rubbish. It would be great to start fresh in another city, away from his father's damn grocery store, and away from the responsibilities of being a husband to Mara Joy. As the plan formulated in his mind, Chad knew he could do it. He could be young and carefree once again. A hand tapped him on his shoulder, crashing him back to reality. He turned to the assailant. Mara Joy stood before him. She looked weak and tired. Dark circles etched her torrid blue eyes. JoBeth stood a short distance behind her, her tissue twisting nervously in her hands. Mara Joy had insisted on walking over to Chad instead of using her wheelchair, causing JoBeth incredible amounts of anguish. By the look on her daughter's face, the walk had been an immense burden. "Take me home, Chad." Mara Joy looked coolly into his wooden face. He looked down at the ground, unable to look into Mara Joy's enchanting devil eyes, feeling she could see into the very core of his soul. "I want to go to our home." Chad's head shot up nervously. He began to break into a cold sweat. Mara Joy reached out and grasped Chad's arm with surprising strength. "Chad, please." He nodded idiotically, and obediently took her arm in his. She smiled up at him wickedly. "That's a good husband," she purred. Chad began to tremble. Where had he seen her smile like that before? They drove in silence as Chad turned into the driveway of their home. He stopped the car and was about to open the door to help Mara Joy out when she reached across and placed her hand gently on his lap, very close to his privates. He felt her fingers lightly brush against him and was ashamed of how he responded. A grave chuckle echoed from deep within her. "Chad, darling, you are such a walking hormone." Blood surfaced on his face, and he pushed Mara Joy's hand away, disgusted with himself. She leaned back in her seat and laughed maliciously, her hands cupping her jacket snugly around her neck. The black veil, half covering her eyes, couldn't shield the menace behind it. "Cut it out. Let's just get into the house, and I will make you some hot tea." He shifted uneasily in his seat and opened the door. Something was frighteningly familiar with this scene. "That is a wonderful idea," she simpered, unbuttoning her coat. He tried not to look as she expertly unfastened the snaps on the front of her black dress. "Mara Joy?" He swallowed the lump forming in his throat and uncomfortably shifted in his seat. A heavy breast popped free from her bra. It was big and swollen from the pregnancy. Chad swallowed hard, unable to sustain his growing arousal. He hated himself for wanting her so much when they stood at their unborn child's monument only moments ago. "Touch me," Mara Joy ordered as she caressed herself. "Touch me." He grabbed her eagerly, diving into her warm, waiting breasts. He nuzzled them shamefully, unable to control himself, feeling himself heat up with want. She cried out in delight, clutching his head tightly to her. "You are mine," she mewed. "You will always be mine." She pushed his back against the seat, her chest naked and heaving in front of him. "Do you want me?" she asked, straddling him. She pinched her nipples hard, tossing back her head in a frenzy. Chad encircled her waist, his mouth sucking up her body. She pushed him away, reaching down between his legs. "Do you want me?" she cooed again as she rubbed between his legs. Chad reached up and grabbed a bobbing breast. Again, she pushed him away. She sat back in her seat, his hands reaching for her. Slowly, she bent her head down between his legs, breathing hot air on the protruding member buried under his pants. He shuddered, unable to contain himself. He was going to have her, miscarriage or not. Mara Joy unzipped his pants, letting his member jump free from its confinement. She pressed the tip of her lips to the smooth tissue. Chad looked down, anticipating Mara Joy's next move. She looked up, her eyes glinting with mischief. The dark circles were still under her eyes, but there was something else. Something that frightened and excited him at the same time. "Do you want me?" Her raspy voice almost pleading as her lips caressing him, her tongue flickering. "Yes, yes," he snarled, forcing her head down onto him. He closed his eyes and leaned back, letting pleasure envelop him. As he succumbed to wave after wave of Mara Joy gratifying him late into the night, he felt each nail hammered deep into his own coffin. Lying awake naked in bed with Mara Joy sleeping deeply, draped across his chest, he realized where he had seen her smile like that before. It had been on their wedding day. When she married him, it had been for life, and she would do anything to keep him hers forever. Chapter 31. Pauline stood outside the shed, waiting to be invited inside by her sisters. She twisted her light brown hair, streaked with gold, around her finger. Gingerly, she put the ends into her mouth and sucked. She liked to suck on her hair, even if mean old Mara Joy would yell at her and say she was disgusting. That just made Pauline want to suck on her hair more. She would have thought Mara Joy would be nicer to her, considering she couldn't have any little kids of her own on account of the miscarriage that happened 2 years ago and wasn't allowed to be mentioned. But that didn't matter. Mara Joy continued to be mean to Pauline. She would always find something to hit her for, whether it was for slurping her milk or dragging her feet, which Pauline always did when Mara Joy came over to the house. She liked getting Mara Joy angry. The only problem was that whenever she got Mara Joy angry, Mama got furious and would start declaring that Mara Joy should not be upset in her own home. Her own home? Didn't she have a home with Chad? Mara Joy always liked to come over to get Alan Michael and take him on special trips to the zoo and movies. She never took Pauline on these special outings. She never even asked if Pauline wanted to go. Maybe it was because Alan Michael was younger, and it made Mara Joy feel like she had a child to care for. Alan Michael was only 2 years younger than she, not that much younger. Besides, 11 years old wasn't all that grown up. Pauline sighed. It didn't really bother her that Mara Joy neglected to take her anywhere. What bothered her was that Mama never told Mara Joy to include Pauline on these outings. Mama insisted Joanne and Constance take Alan Michael with them whenever they took Pauline out. Why didn't Mama uphold the same rules with Mara Joy? It didn't matter. Joanna and Constance liked taking Pauline places and not Mikey. Joanna and Constance weren't angry with their little sister when they found Pauline in their secret hiding place. They let the shed be her special place, too. Pauline kicked a few stones with the toe of her shoe. The pebbles flew up and made a pinging noise as they hit the side of the shed. Joanna and Constance both turned around from their crouched positions, startled. Relief spread across their faces when they realized it was only Pauline. "What are you doing lurking over there? Come on, get out of the shadows and sit with us." Joanne waved Pauline over. Pauline smiled, releasing the sticky strand of hair from her mouth. She clumsily ran over to her sisters, who sat huddled together like conspirators, and she crouched between the two girls. All three looked alike, except for a slight difference in hair color. Joanna's long hair was light brown and poker straight, much like their mother's. Constance's hair was a wavy blonde that fell just below her chin. Pauline's was a mix between the two. It was brown with lots of gold highlights sprinkled throughout her shoulder-length hair. It was not wavy like Constance's, but not as straight as Joanna's either. All three had their father's large, slanting green eyes. All the girls had tan complexions, as did their brother Alan Michael, who, unlike the girls, had inherited their father's looks. The only one who was fair-skinned was Mara Joy. Joanna turned to Constance, bent on continuing her conversation where she had left off. "How can I get him to notice me?" Joanna asked, firmly pressing her lips together, strained. At 16, nearly 17, she had transformed from a plain, gangly girl into a slender beauty. She was tall and lean, with an attractive oval face. She had grace and elegance that were appealing, but not threatening, to the opposite sex. "I have it all planned out," Constance replied as she waved her hands into the air, a habit she employed when wanting to explain herself. Pauline lifted her hands, mimicking her sister. Joanna gently but kindly stopped Pauline's waving hands and observed Constance's animated face. "Well, don't keep me in the dark. Tell me, how can I get Chad to notice me?" Her eyes twinkled. The time had finally come. It was the opportunity to get back at Mara Joy for all her years of torment to teach her a lesson and give her a dose of her own medicine. She comes over every Friday to take Alan Michael to God knows where. When she comes back, she always stays and visits with Mama and Pappy. When Mara Joy leaves with Alan Michael, tell Ma and Pa you have a date." She looked at both Pauline and Joanna, ensuring she had their full attention. "Go over to Chad's. He will be there," she said before Joanna could interrupt. "He works over the bills on Friday. You know, trying to figure out some way to pay for the stuff Mara Joy buys." It did make sense. Mara Joy and Chad enjoyed the same routine every Friday for months. She couldn't remember the last time it had not been so. Joanna felt her stomach flip-flop with excitement. It was the beginning. The moment was finally here after planning for so long. "But what if she comes home before I have left?" she stuttered, trying to find a hitch in Constance's plan. She shuddered out of the blue, her body rippling with a mind of its own. Chad's image emerged from her consciousness, always there, ready and waiting since the faithful day 2 years ago when she decided to make him hers. "I'll call when she leaves home," Constance said, matter-of-factly. "You are so smart, Connie," Joanna squealed, grabbing hold of Pauline and hugging her. Pauline had stopped listening to the two girls and proceeded to daydream. When her sister clutched her, squealing in delight, she squealed back in tune, caught up in the excitement. Constance shrugged but laughed. She loved Joanna dearly and was the only one with permission to call her Connie. Everyone else, including Pauline, called her Constance. Connie was a term of endearment meant only for Joanna. Constance firmly believed that the name Connie did not evoke an image of intelligence. She knew Joanna thought she was brilliant, but to everyone else, she had to prove her mind worked. With a no-nonsense name like Constance, people had to see that she was more than just a girl, but as an astute person with a working brain in her head. "Then it's set," Constance beamed, crossing her arms across her swelling chest. Her plan was foolproof. "I suppose it is." Joanna covered her mouth with her hands, not knowing what to do. She didn't know if she should burst out laughing or throw up. "You can do it, sis. I have faith in you," Constance said, gently placing her hand on Joanna's knee. Joanna smiled weakly, putting her hands on top of Constance's. They felt cool and smooth, familiar and protective, and she needed to feel safe at that moment. What they were doing was uncharted territory to them. There would be no turning back after she succeeded in their agenda, and she planned to succeed. "I hope so, Constance. I hope I know what I'm getting myself into," she silently breathed to herself, Chad's dark features flooding through her thoughts once more. That Friday, Mara Joy began her usual ritual of preparing herself to take her brother to the movies. They enjoyed going to silent films, particularly comedies. The world was moving fast. She had even heard rumors of talkies. How she dreamed of becoming a movie star. She just knew she could do it if given a chance. She had the looks and the talent. She admired herself in the vanity mirror and pretended to be surprised by Charlie Chaplin. Chad leaned against the opening of the bedroom door, watching his wife's performance. He shook his head, wondering for the umpteenth time what went on in that woman's head. "Can't you stay home tonight for once?" he asked. Mara Joy turned around venomously. She didn't like to be snuck up on. Chad had a way of suddenly being there when she least expected. If there was one thing she didn't like, it was being startled. She had to be in control. Always. She scowled and turned back to the mirror. Picking up a brush, she began to brush her hair. She had it set that day, so the tight curls were somewhat tamed for the moment. "You know how important my brother is to me," She brushed harder into her black locks, glaring at Chad's reflection in the mirror. "What about me? Am I not important to you?" he asked. He had aged a lot in the 2 years since his marriage to Mara Joy. He didn't look nearly 20 years. They fought constantly, Mara Joy always demanding something of him and cruelly made him do it for her. The mask was off. He knew who and what his wife was now. Anytime he threatened to leave her, she held some kind of blackmail over his head, saying he beat her, or worse. He felt weak, a shadow of a man for staying. He couldn't stand her, and yet, when she wanted him, he went to her like a dog in heat, begging for more. He couldn't seem to help himself. She knew how to make him fall to her feet. This alone made Chad loathe himself. Every time he climaxed in her arms, he hated himself more for being spineless. "Have you forgotten that I will never have a child of my own?" She glared at him through the mirror. Chad turned away from her ice-cold stare, unable to stomach looking at her. It was almost as though she blamed him for her failure to have children, as if it were his fault she had lost the baby and couldn't get pregnant again. "Do you not realize he is the closest thing I will ever have to a son?" She turned around, forcing Chad to look at her. "Are you so selfish as to deny me the only mothering experience I shall ever have? You know how close my brother is to me. You can see me any time. I'm your wife." Turning away from her stinging words, Chad walked out of the room. "I am your wife," pounding in his ears. Heading toward the front door, Joanna called back to her parents in the other room. Jo Beth didn't look up from her knitting. She wanted to finish the matching sweaters she was making for Mara Joy and Alan Michael. Alan looked up from his newspaper. "Where are you going, love?" he asked, smiling at his daughter. Joanna smiled back, feeling a tinge of guilt for what she was about to embark on. She loved her father dearly. He was a good man and was kind and loving to all his children. "Out with friends, Pa," Joanna said nervously. At least, it wasn't lying, really. If she kept telling herself that, she would eventually believe it. Then the guilt of deceiving her father would fade. She hoped. "Well, are you too old to kiss your father goodbye?" Joanna went over and planted a dry kiss on Alan's whiskery cheek. She went to leave and thought twice about it, turning and hugging her pa, too. Alan warmly patted her back, gently kissing the top of her forehead. "Be in by 9, he said, rearranging his paper again. "Pa," Joanna implored, giving him a frown that melted his heart. Only his children and Jo Beth could make him do as they pleased. Everyone else listened to Alan Benson. But when it came to his family, he was all heart and couldn't turn any of them down. He thought of his childhood, alone and unloved by his parents. Life with Jo Beth had changed all that. With her and Shauna, they had formed the family Alan had always dreamed of. 10, please? It is Saturday tomorrow, Joanna requested. 10, no later, Alan said firmly. Thank you. Joanna squealed and kissed Alan again on the cheek before running out the door. Alan looked at his paper and chuckled to himself. His children were leading lives so different from his own childhood. Alan, that girl has you wrapped around her baby finger. 10 o'clock indeed. Jo Beth tried to look upset with her husband, but she wasn't really. She enjoyed watching him dote on his children. He was a good father, and she adored him for it. She went back to knitting, faking disapproval. Oh, why not, darling? Mara Joy was out till 10 many nights when she was younger than Joanna. Besides, this is the first time I have ever heard Joanna mention a friend. Other than Constance and Pauline, she never mentions any other children. Alan sighed. It's nice that our daughters are close. Still, it is also nice to see them interact with the outside world. Mara Joy and Alan Michael have always been popular, unlike our other girls. I just hope Joanna won't be naive and get mixed up in trouble. She is not sophisticated with the outside world like Mara Joy is, JoBeth said, busily attacking her yarn. Alan rolled his eyes at his wife. What? JoBeth asked, looking up from her work. She is not a moron, JoBeth. Joanna is just as sophisticated as Mara Joy. She is just not as flamboyant. Well, whatever, JoBeth said, placing her knitting down and going to her husband. I went to see Shauna today. I cannot believe that little girl of hers. She is the spitting image of her mama when she was 6. She sat down beside Alan. Alan placed his arm around JoBeth's shoulders. She snuggled into his familiar, safe embrace. You are going to miss them terribly when they leave. JoBeth wiped away a tear already forming in the corner of her eye. She would never forgive Oliver for taking Shauna away again. Why did he have to move them to the country? Was it not Oliver who insisted they move to the city? I will. She wiped a tear away and leaned into Alan for comfort. I just find it hard to believe that she is all grown up with a family of her own. JoBeth frowned and looked up into her husband's face. He had aged. He looked 39 instead of 33, but then she had aged too, and she was only 31. Life had been hard for them, and although they still looked quite good, their faces sometimes showed the weary roads they had traveled. They didn't look hard or rough, but they had never really been young. At least Alan Michael isn't grown up yet, she grinned, erasing the signs of time in her eyes. Do I get the feeling you want another baby? He placed his hand on her belly. Even after giving birth to 5 children, JoBeth's stomach was flat and smooth. Oh, stop! JoBeth laughed and clutched his hand to her. I wish Mara Joy could have given us a granddaughter resembling her. It seems so unfair to her. She sighed heavily. We do have 3 other daughters and a son who will all give us grandchildren one day. Alan could not believe how much he loved her. After all their years together, he loved her more with each passing day. She was more beautiful to him than she was the day before. He still wondered how he had been so lucky to have her as his own, his wife, and the mother of his children. His forever. I need to hold you, my love, Alan whispered into JoBeth's ear as he held her tightly. She felt a shiver run up her spine and tucked her head under Alan's chin. Let's go to bed, JoBeth, he said huskily. She reached up and kissed Alan tenderly on the lips. Lead the way, my darling, she whispered into his lips. I will always follow.